Good evening, ladies and germs. Before we go too far into this, let me actually check you. Yeah, it looks like we are. All right, cool. For some reason, last week we didn't get on Mr. Tester's broadcast there, so I want to make sure that we're actually broadcasting to you as well. So, everybody, welcome to episode 10 of the Automotive Podcast where you don't have to build cars, but it sure does help. Tonight we're one man down with Sean being attending some family gathering out in California. But we do have with us Mr. Steve Perry, a Detroit area builder, who's going to be our special guest tonight. We're going to talk about all of his exceptional work, some IPMS Nationals winning items there. I didn't realize exactly how many first place you had gotten until I looked at your Facebook page the other day. I was involved in one of them as a judge, but I didn't realize the other one. So, Steve, you're our guest here. What's going on in your model world, as it would be right now?
So, got a lot of things going. This is really not typical of me, but I have multiple projects. I wouldn't say they're at risk of stalling out, but usually I like to start a project and finish it and before starting another. But all that to say, I've got a 72 Mustang funny car that I actually started in 2015 and, built it in stages. And then I've got a 69 Corvette wheel stander, and it's got an all brass frame. It's pretty detailed. But I took a break from those, and I'm actually working on a 125th Triumph motorcycle. So multiple projects going. That's really not like me, but that's how it is right now. And then I've also got my resin casting business going, Calnaga Castings, and getting back into model car journalism. I don't know if you guys saw the first issue of Auto Modeler, but I had a couple of pieces in there. That was very satisfying.
I haven't seen it yet.
Great to work with Scott Colmer. He's the editor and the champion of that publication. So, yeah, I got a lot going on. And then the other part of the answer is I am just getting this deep in 3D printing and just loving it.
All right, well, I'll leave you two alone, and somebody pays me in 2 hours.
I bought the printer about 3 years ago, and I was scared of it. But, one thing led to another. And it wasn't so much the printer, although I had some fails, but it was also the software. I do my own design. I've only downloaded a printable file once, and it was a figure of Santa Claus. But and I printed him in two different sizes. I made it like a 5'2" Santa Claus and a 6' Santa Claus. But anyways,
so wait a minute, you must be talking about an FDM, because nobody resin prints that. Like not the liquid, but the little spools.
No, I do liquid. I mean, 1/25th scale. He was
all
75 millimeters.
Okay. You said
but
6
if
foot.
you scaled them out, there were two of them. One was a biggish dude, and the other not so much. More of a jolly old Saint Nick. Anyways, but typically I'm doing my own CAD design, and I am just having a blast. I love it. I retired from an automotive company about 2 years ago. I was never a CAD jockey. I was in engineering and project management, but I was not a CAD designer. And now I am a CAD jockey doing my 3D printing, and I am just having a blast. Just love it. I'll work late into the night and then finally go to bed, and the prints are running, and then I know, well, it's 5 a.m. The print should be ready. So I jump up, and so it's so bad. Sometimes I even check my prints before I make coffee. I mean, I'm pretty motivated. So that's what's going on. Life is good. Really enjoying it.
Well, they got to keep busy in retirement. So teach yourself a whole new hobby.
Right. So there's two cliches you hear in life. One is long been since validated for me, and that is that your kids grow up really fast. And when I first heard that cliche, I thought I had just had my first. And I thought, man, he can't grow up fast enough. We're not getting any sleep. This is stressful. But 25 years later, they do grow up really fast. The other life cliche is you'll never be as busy as when you retire. And I always thought, how can that be? You know, that doesn't even make sense. But the reality is I'm busy, but in a good way. You know, I've got more going on and more to do than I can get done in a day. You know, I have a comfortable backlog. There's no risk of me getting bored. And my theory is that jobs, at least in modeling, in tasks, they sort of expand to fit the amount of time you give them. And I find myself when I'm working on models or on my real car, I don't cut corners. I'm not rushing it. So, you know, maybe that's why you stay busy, is that the tasks that you do have expand and fill the time in a good way. But yeah, I'm having a great time. Doing some traveling. I went to the IPMS Nationals in Madison, Indiana. That was great. We drove, my wife and I drove here from Michigan up there and just had a great time. So doing a little bit of traveling. And another thing I like doing in retirement is taking in motorsports events of all kinds. I just love it all. So I went to the Pro Motocross at Redbud a couple months ago. I'm going to the NHRA Nationals this weekend.
Ooh.
Yeah, I just Detroit Supercross, of course. I go to that every year. But I like the dirt bikes. I like cars. And then I'm also involved with Formula SAE. Have you guys heard of that?
No.
Okay, so SAE is Society of Automotive Engineers. Formula SAE is a collegiate motorsports competition that SAE sponsors and sanctions. And it's been going on for about 30 years. And the cars are small open wheel road racers, bigger than a go-kart, way smaller than a real Indy car, but you know, maybe a little smaller than a Formula Ford. I think it's like a 70-inch wheelbase, 10-inch wheels. So they're smallish. A lot of cars run Honda CBR 600s, okay. But engine is open. I think it's 650 cc's maximum. Anyways, so it's a collegiate motorsports competition, and they've got an electric division where it's battery electric formula cars. And I'm a volunteer to do tech reviews. So the students have to prepare documentation of their designs before they even get to the track. And it's on the electric cars, it's how the battery's constructed, what size wires, what size connectors, their fusing, their relays, all of that, just to make sure it complies with the rules. And the rules are 80 to 90% for safety. But I have learned so much in the process of doing those tech reviews. And then I also go to the actual events. They have the main event is at Michigan International Speedway. And I'm a volunteer there. I do tech reviews on the cars for a couple days. And then I'm a flagman for the actual races for the cars, which is a lot of fun. Yeah.
How fast are those with the 600 cc motor and the electric?
You know, they're geared down. I think they get up to about 45 on the autocross course, maybe 50. They do have 6-speed transmissions. They're quick.
Oh yeah.
All-wheel drive is allowed, but you don't see a lot of that. In the electric division, some of the cars have 4-wheel motors. They're actually quite sophisticated. I mean, my hat's off to these students that design and build these cars and then do all the different events. There's a design competition, there's a cost competition. They have to present a business plan. There's a tilt test to make sure the car won't roll over. There's a water test to make sure it won't short out. There's a skid pad where they measure G-force. There's an acceleration test. There's an endurance event, and there's an autocross event. So, they really put the car and the team through its paces. It's pretty grueling. And, some of the teams I've talked to, they'll say our goal is to just pass tech inspection and get to the track. We have no aspirations of winning on the track. We just want to get out there. So, and some of the teams have a long legacy and they've learned a lot from each other, and knowledge is handed down from class to class. There's other teams that are brand new. A lot of the teams this year and last year were restarting after a hiatus due to COVID.
Okay.
So, as I said, I just really respect these students. I've learned so much from them. I love the cars, the teams, the competition. It's just all good. So, along with modeling, that's another thing I do. And there's a similar event called Baja SAE. It's the same idea, collegiate student competition, but those are little off-road cars. And they use a spec engine. They use a Kohler single-cylinder four-stroke. But the same idea. There's a comprehensive rule book. They build the car to the rules. They present it, and they go out. The cool thing about Baja SAE is all the cars are on the track at the same time for the endurance event. So you do get some wheel-to-wheel racing. For Formula SAE, there may be 3 or 4 cars on the autocross track at the same time, but there's no wheel-to-wheel passing. There's a controlled passing lane. So it's a little different. So anyways, got a lot going on. I'm just having a blast. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you're very busy.
I am. Well, and then there's this old Corvette in the garage that I work on and keep that running. So my hands are full. I know the next question. It's a 72.
Okay.
I know the next question. It's a base motor, 200 horse small block.
Okay.
And I know the next question. It's Elkhart Green.
How did you know?
I'll say, did you know the next question? Did you build a model of it yet?
No. Nah. But we'll talk more about that later.
All right, Mr. Tester, you're not running a racetrack, but what have you been doing the last 2 weeks?
I've been resin printing like a fiend lately. Downloading a lot of files, and since I got that new printer, I've just been going crazy. So the channel, I brought up these Mustangs, printed 2 of them for a little comparison of the unicorn, and did a little comparison over at an angle and flat, and just to see as an experiment how the prints would come out, and and the audience seems to really love the slicing and just the step-by-step of it. So I will continue to make these videos and see where it goes. The scale model experiment just seems to evolve over the years. It's been 4 years now. First it started as like a straight build channel, and now it's like resin printing and Japanese kits. So who knows where it'll go after that. James, you got a new toy today?
I say resin printing and airplane modeling. That's where James is going next. Yeah, you now that you mention it, I hadn't thought about it at all, actually. But yeah, so today I got in my copy, one of what will be 12 of this, the new. It's literally what the company is. The new Porsche 911 RSR. This kit is I don't know, a year since they said it was going to come out, and then a year since they showed the test shots, and then a year since they showed the CAD, and yeah, it's like 4 years out of date at this point. Well, it's more than 4 years out of date, but finally, this came out. I got the upgrade set with it, which, as I was telling Mr. Tester and Mr. Parrott earlier, comes with 4 sheets of carbon fiber in it.
Wow.
Yes.
So you're carbon fibering basically the whole bottom of the car and the whole interior of the car and a little bit of the outside. And there's a whole separate instruction sheet for that goodness. And yeah, so that's where my focus is distracted to right now.
Is
I
that
would
a
say
Scale Motorsports detail up kit or Studio 27? What is that?
this is factory. This is
Factory Hero?
BMAX Nunu does a detail up set for every single one of their kits themselves. So this is seatbelt ribbon, an antenna, a turn metal base for the antenna. I think there's only 1 sheet of actual photo etch in here, and then 4 sheets of carbon fiber. I don't think there's any extra decals. Usually, they make a few 80s kits, which were tobacco sponsored, and of course, Kane had that in auto kits. So those decals are always in the detail upset, and sometimes like Saybelt logos will be in here because I guess Saybelt's real picky about their licensing. And yeah, I think I know what I'm going to do with it. I was telling James earlier, I said I'd say that I was going to one-arm the bench off, but that would mean that I was actually working on something of import that anyone would notice that I've stopped building. So yeah.
What about the LFA, James?
The LFA and everything else, it's all just... I have ADD, basically. I don't really, but it's just modeling ADHD, basically, and it's very amusing. It's very exciting, and if I don't start this in the next day or two, it'll flutter off into the cobwebs, and something else will come out. And
right.
That becomes very frustrating at times. But I think I'm going to do this one's molded in white. It's not molded in pink, thank God, because then you'd be trying to make it white after that. But I think I'm going to do that Brumos livery. It was a 3rd place car in 2019. And yeah, we'll see. We'll see where that goes. It's not a new kits, you have a couple of them, but you haven't built any of them yet. Or no, you did. You built an M6, didn't you, James?
I built the M6, yeah. The PlayStation car.
Yeah. So this one's hopefully not quite the finagling to get it together like the M6 is. But it's 80 pieces or so it's not a terribly complex kit. It has transaxle detail, but then you put a giant splitter on the bottom that covers it all up, so I don't even know why it's
right.
in there. They skip that part. Save a few bucks. But
does it have an engine?
It's got the bottom of one. It's got the bottom, like the transaxle, the transmission, the transaxle, and it's got the entire exhaust system, which you then cover up with a giant plate with the splitter on it.
Right.
Like, let's see here. Yeah, so you get that's gonna go right through there, isn't it? So you get like that much of the transmission. It goes onto the top of the engine, that's sort of kind of hanging out in the chassis there, and then you go over here. You put the exhaust system on. Oh, it's very fancy looking, and then put wah wah. You put that giant cover over it. And all
with 45 pieces of carbon on it.
Right.
Basically, let me see. You could. I was going to move on, but now you said that. Let me see how many pieces of carbon fiber we're actually looking at here.
Each one of those streaks in the diffuser is going to need 3 pieces, one for the top, one for each side. Yeah, I know those kits.
For the top, you mean the edge of the?
The top edge. Yeah,
that's got to be a thin little decal.
27. There's 27 decals on that.
You'll be blind by the time. Make sure you line up all the fabric too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No point
all
in
facing the right direction.
It's to say, no point in doing it if the weave doesn't match. I mean, let me see. That is one. I think that there's one decal sheet of this is the actual. Yeah, this one. This is the decal sheet that is just for the splitter.
Good times.
Wow.
Good times.
Yeah. It's not like that's the first thing I've ever carbon fibered, so it's not like this stuff doesn't really bother me that much. And
You
get a
should do
Kevlar-
just the splitter first.
Kevlar
Get
for
the
the
hardest
seat.
part done first.
And the one that I don't understand, and I know it's a thing that they've done with all of their kits, but you got that giant, like, you know, flat of the chassis pan one. First of all, it's a gigantic decal. Woo-hoo-hoo, let's have fun with that. But like, why? You never got to turn this thing over.
I would take that
Even
big
the ITMS
piece,
stopped picking model kits up.
I would take that big piece any day over a pinstripe decal. Even just one pinstripe decal. I'll do the big one all day long.
I mean, things like if you have the carbon fiber sheet for like the Lamborghini Veneno, that's like 180 pieces on that.
I did that
I have
one.
the carbon fiber for that 1/20th scale McLaren F1 car that I'll never build. That's 227 pieces of pre-cut carbon fiber for that, because each one of those little winglets on the front has a little, you know, piece of carbon fiber on the top and the bottom and the edge, a little tiny weeny, you know, sliver. But
Which
yeah,
is like a pinstripe.
Yeah, basically it's a pinstripe of carbon fiber.
Johns Weber did a car, and I don't remember which one. It might have been the tequila one, or the green beer one. That every spoke on the wheel had a decal, and so there was like 30 decals per wheel.
Yeah, I think that is the Sing Sal beer one that has the every single piece. Yeah, because it's like the whole way around the wheel lip itself, and then every single indent between the wheel arch or the blade or whatever you want to consider the split of the rim. Yeah, it has one color going the whole way around, and then another, and then little dashes going around the inside of it on the face of where the wheel weight would be.
Good times.
Yeah, that's the. I mean, I'm still sitting here looking at that Audi A4 that as I spray painted the chassis and the interior, you know, to start painting it. I haven't. The Civic's still sitting here in pieces. So yeah, I mean, no one will notice. I don't think. I still have to build. I still have all of this stuff at some point.
Talk about some of the tricks to do a good carbon fiber decal job.
I think it really depends on the manufacturer of the carbon fiber, because like Nunu is getting their decals printed, and I know a lot of people this won't make any difference because they don't build these kind of cars, but James will know what I'm talking about. Nunu gets their stuff printed at the same printing place that, like, well, maybe not the exact same, but the same general printing place, because China's set up in the way that like every town is a specialty factory. This town makes all electronics. This one does all tooling stuff, and there's one that does like all the printing stuff. And so SK Decals and LB Productions and the guy and Frankie who does SK is the one that designs the decals for Nunu. They're all getting printed in the same basic geography in the same town by printers that are all on par with each other. And those decals are very thin, very flexible, very easy to use, and for the most part don't require like a lot of heat or a lot of beating with solvents to get them to set down. Mm-hmm. You're using one of those old Studio 27 carbon fiber decal sheets. They're printed like 10 layers deep. There's a white underlayer to them, and then it's a layer of black and silver and gray and black and silver, and it's to make that hashing that they do.
You have to break those decals in half to get them to.
They're super detailed because they're in patterns that don't exist in like just free sheets of carbon fiber where you could make your own. But man, they're tough. I've spent in excess of an hour putting a single carbon fiber decal on with their sheets before, and that's using like not quite Solvus, but using Tamiya Extra Strong, using heat,
hair dryer,
and I think I don't have it anywhere close by here, but I had the interior done for like an AMG GT3, not the old one, and the interior after I got done with it, I didn't pay enough attention to the like residue I was leaving, and so there's little spots all over it because it's got the tide marks from the solvent drying out. That just...
So do you paint gloss black underneath in case there are any gaps? They're not as easy to see.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I disappeared there for a second. But yeah, the tide marks were on there, and that just really frustrated every living daylights out of me. I had a couple people tell me, "Oh, get rid of it with this, get rid of it with that," and it just made it even worse. And so,
and they don't go away after clear either.
No, they don't. You just have really shiny white spots.
Wow. So there's some chatter in the comments about brands of printers. What brand printer do you have, Steve?
It's an Anycubic Photon Mono X.
Okay.
How about you?
I just bought a Saturn 4.
And
but
how do you like it?
Oh, I love it. I had an Anycubic Mono X2, which is a 4K machine, and I stepped up to the 12K machine, and it's like night and day. So
print quality or speed or size? What?
Print quality for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. When I compare something that I printed with 4K versus something that I did with 12, the 4 looks bloated. If that makes any sense to you, it's just that much finer.
Oh, yeah. Well, I measure my parts, and typically they're bigger than design, and I have found the limit on, for me anyways, in my process on layer thickness and exposure time. I had an interesting problem this summer. Is my printer is in the basement near the air conditioner, the evaporator side of the air conditioner. And of course, in the summer, the AC runs and it's cold in the basement. And in the winter, it's warm because the furnace is running. And I started having unexplained print failures. Same settings, same files that had worked before. What happened? And I realized it's too cold down here. So I moved the printer upstairs. The top of the house is warmer, and no more failures on the prints. So
I actually I have mine in the basement now, and I bought a heater for last winter for inside. It goes inside the booth, and it kept it at 79 degrees at all times.
Yeah. So that makes a difference. What layer thickness do you print at typically?
For the Mustangs, I did it. The Mustangs, I did it at 0.035.
Yeah.
But if I have something tiny, like a windshield wiper or something, I'll do that at 0.02, and it just goes on forever just to print just a little piece. But
right.
Sleeping anyway, so it doesn't matter.
02. What's your exposure time with the new machine?
2 seconds.
Okay.
2 second exposure time.
Yeah. I found that print quality was strongly related to exposure time. Right? The longer you expose, that's when you get the bloating that you were talking about. And I had designed some tires, motorcycle tires with a tread in them. And at 1.75 seconds, the tread was almost filled in. At 1.4, you could see the tread. At 1.2, the print failed. So, and I'm printing at 0.02 layer thickness. So I'm really finding the limit. I'm trying to do printed spoked wheels for a motorcycle. And the key there is to get the spokes as thin as possible. And a typical kit in 1/25th scale, typical kit wheel is about 22 thousandths, actual size of the model part, 22 thousandths of an inch in diameter, maybe 25, which is 5/8 of an inch in scale. That's a really big spoke. That's like a 32 Ford wheel. I mean, so I'm trying to go as small as possible. And I found the limit. I had not printing failures, but just wonky printing at 16 thousandths, but at 18 thousandths diameter, it comes out okay. And in fact, they don't break, they don't fall apart or misprint, but they kind of bow. But after a couple of days, they flatten out. And then there's just the frailty of the part itself. You know,
are you using ABS?
Sorry?
Are you using an ABS resin?
I think it is. It's Anycubic okay. Basic.
So there's basic, and then there's what I use is water wash, and then there's what's called ABS resin, which is like a tougher resin. So you may benefit from the ABS.
Try it. Cool.
I think.
Sorry, James.
So no. I think since we're discussing motorcycles, this is a great place to start this topic. Mr. Perry here went to the IPMS Nationals in Madison, Wisconsin, which fans of the show know that I also attended. And this model that he built was the talk of the motorcycle table.
Oh, for sure.
And Steve, this is a chainsaw with motorcycle wheels on it. For people don't know, it's a Husqvarna. Back in the day, they made motorcycles. Most people know them now for making leaf throwers. So, my understanding, if I recall rightly, this is almost completely scratch built. Yes.
Well, a lot of it is. So, I got the kit at a swap meet for the box, because the box art shows Malcolm Smith going over a jump at a Supercross. That was before they even called it a Supercross. It's in the LA Coliseum, and they used to call that the Super Bowl of motocross. But I bought it for the box art for $5, and I opened it up, and it had been built and then broken, as most motorcycle kits are. I've bought a lot of used bike kits, and they've always got the wheels put together. Sometimes the engine's put together and painted, but they never get as far as put the engine in the frame and the frame together and the forks on. When you buy a used bike model kit, that's usually where they gave up, is right after the wheels and the engine. But anyways, this kit was fairly complete, and I wanted to do IPMS style weathering on it. And so I said, okay, I'm going to build a dirt bike, and it's going to be dirty like a dirt bike. And, here's this old Husqvarna. And so I Googled it, and sure enough, up comes pictures of Steve McQueen's Husqvarna 400 Cross that he rode in the movie On Any Sunday. Well, I don't know if you guys are into dirt bikes at all, but the movie came out in 72 or 73. Steve McQueen bankrolled it. Bruce Brown, who also did a movie about surfing called The Endless Summer, he was the director and the producer. And then the star riders in it were Malcolm Smith, who was this great all-around rider, and Mert Lawwell, who was a flat tracker and an AMA rider. But the bikes that they rode were Husqvarna 400 Cross versions, both Malcolm Smith and Steve McQueen. And I thought, what a subject. And McQueen's bike was up for auction through Bonham's. And I got it here somewhere, but I think it sold for $230,000.
Wow.
So it's, per record, the most ever paid for a Husqvarna. So I just really, the subject intrigued me, the bike intrigued me. I did want to do weathering. Bonham's, the auction house, had posted about 30 pictures online. So that's good and bad news as a modeler. The good news is you have plenty of detail and reference, right? The bad news is you have no excuse not to get it right. Right?
Right.
So all this reference materials there, and the bike in the kit is it's a
Who is the manufacturer?
72 400 motocross, and the actual bike, McQueen's bike, is a 70 400 cross. There are some small differences, like the side cases are sort of oval shaped. Oh, I'm using my cursor, but you guys can't see what I'm pointing at. If you look at the side covers on the engine where it says Husqvarna, yeah, those on the kit are more squarish. That's a Monarch 400. This is a 400 cross, and the side covers look like that. So I actually took the Revell kit and cut out the Husqvarna logo, and I inset it into my own basically carving or molding of the side cover. So that's how I got a 400 cross engine cover. The only kit part that I used unmodified is the chain and sprocket piece. Everything else was cleaned up or modified. The forks are pretty close. I actually used bare metal foil chrome on the fork tubes to make them look shiny. I didn't try and paint that. I just wrapped a strip of bare metal foil around that. Of course, the big scratch build were the wheels. So those wheels were machined from aluminum, but and they're Acront rims. Acront rims have kind of a matte finish like that, and they have a rib, and you can sort of see that. There's a hump in the middle, like most rims have, but then there's a rib on the shoulder.
Okay.
And those were machined. And because I thought that I may want to build this again, I actually made resin castings of the rims. So what you're looking at are resin castings. Those aren't the masters that were machined. I took the kit hubs and drilled out the spoke holes, and then I laced. That is,
of course you did.
12 thousandths aluminum wire, and then I used 32 thousandths brass tube for the spoke nipples. I'm looking at this picture that you're showing right now, James, and that's supposed to be a rim lock sticking through the rim. It's terrible. That doesn't look anything like a rim lock. That's what it's supposed to be. Another cool thing, if you want to pull back, is Husqvarna's came with gray cables. McQueen's bike was pretty new at the time, so the cables hadn't been replaced, and stock Husqvarna cables are gray. And then up at the top by the handlebars, there's a little oil filler fitting. That's what those gray things are. And so I found beading wire in gray that was the correct diameter, and then I put little chunks of styrene plastic to be the oil fittings. The handlebars are brass rod. So typical bike handlebars are 7/8 of an inch. So that's a little bit more than 62 thousandths. Well, we're talking 12th scale now. So that is actually, I believe it's 2 millimeter brass rod, which scales out very close to 7/8 of an inch. And then the crossbar was soldered on. The clamps holding the bars to the triple clamps are machined from aluminum, and those had to be put on the rod before I bent it, right? Because the bends are tight enough that you wouldn't ever slip on those clamps. So machine the clamps, put them on the rod, bend the rod, solder the crossbar in place, and then the finish is just alclad. So I was very careful to not touch it. The levers and the throttle are all brass and aluminum. And the grips, the hand grips are plastic as well.
How much time did you spend on this model?
I didn't keep a log on this one, but I would estimate about 200 hours.
Okay.
Most of my
over a span of how long?
A log. Sorry.
Over a span of years or months or?
About a year. Let me see. There's a book for that one here somewhere, but I think it was about 10 months or so.
Wow, that's dedication.
Yeah. So the tank on a 400 cross is bigger than on the motocross, and the kit did come with the plastic tank. It was not. There's a later version of the Revell Husqvarna, and it's a desert bike, and it's got a different gas tank. It's what we used to call a Don Vesco skinny fat tank because it's narrow by the seat and it flares out. So the later Revell Husqvarna does not include this tank, but this kit had it, and the chrome pieces were missing. But I glued it together and I filled it in with putty and shaped it, and then I made castings of it. So I made a resin casting of the stock tank, and then I modified that with putty and shaping and made another resin casting of this. And the reason is when you have a resin casting, there's nothing to shrink, right? It's just one solid chunk. And of course, I can make multiple pieces. And I really thought that these might be popular subjects for my resin casting company, Calnaga Castings. And I don't think I've sold one of them. You know, I guess Steve McQueen's Husqvarna is not as the popular subject I thought it would be. But anyways, I made resin castings of the rims and the tank and the engine covers in case anybody wants to do one. The shock absorbers were machined from brass and aluminum. The seat is the kit seat, but I reshaped it quite a bit, and I rescribed those seams in it. And it appears that the seat on McQueen's bike, as it was auctioned, had been recovered. It's just nicer than the rest of the bike. And when I was building it, I said, you got to be accurate. You got to do it this way. But I can just hear those IPMS judges digging me for it. You know, the engine's scratched up. There's dirt on the tires, but why is the seat so clean? And I'm not going to be there to answer them because they're going to be in the room judging and I'll be out having lunch. But, you know, that's the way McQueen's bike was. But I'm really happy with it. I just love the subject. I love the movie. I've seen the movie 15 times or so. And it's funny. I had this model at GSL, and I think it got second or third behind Mike English. I'll take a second place to Mike English any day. He's a fantastic motorcycle modeler. And then Teresi was there, but I think I beat Teresi with it.
What?
But it did win best in class. I think it won best in show at Autorama. But at IPMS, and there was a local IPMS show in Bay City, and I think it got a second or third there. So I felt like there's something these guys don't like about this. And at IPMS this summer, there was a 1/6 scale Honda 4, and it was just beautiful. I mean, it looked like it could start. It had individual fasteners, just beautifully done. And from what I know about IPMS, I thought, yeah, this is what's going to get first. And my dirt bike, who knows? It's just a crapshoot. So honestly, I was really surprised. And that dirt bike model is not perfect. Those laced wheels, they rotate, they actually turn because I like building models with wheels that turn. That's another story in itself, but I just like to do it that way. And the rim's not true, right? If you turn the wheel, it wobbles. So when I park the bike on its stand, I get it in the right position so it's as straight as possible. But if a judge picks it up and looks at it from different angles, and of course, I don't expect this, but if the judge turns the wheel, they're going to see that, no, that wheel is not true. And I thought, yeah, this is IPMS Nationals. They're going to knock it out for that. I really felt like it wasn't going to make it. On the other hand, it is weathered and dirty, and I know the IPMS guys like that. So maybe that was its strong suit. I'm just happy. I'm thankful and I'm happy.
I've never built anything dirty in my life. Everything is shiny new for me.
So James Duff, you said you were part of the judging.
I was, and what I actually
insights for me because
what I actually did judge was this one.
Oh, okay.
So this was your entry in, I guess, what is it, competition straight line?
Yeah, 124 scale.
Yeah, and this is your I believe, because I actually read through your build book, and I'll tell you why in a second. So this is your take on a nostalgia funny car, because it's not an actual replica of a real one. It's your take of one.
Correct.
And the reason why I say that I read your build book was when we were discussing this with the team I was on. This was, at least in my opinion, what was, if somebody else who's in that class sees this and gets offended, oh well. But this was the best thing on the table, and the thing that was going to get you dinged. And I want to hear your feedback on this because I know there was a reason it's like this. Was the fact that all of the lines on your decals have this wiggle to them. They're not straight. And the guys I was with were insistent that you painted this by hand and it was sloppy. And I was like, but this wiggle is on every decal on this car. It's on the roof decals, it's on the side decals. So there's a reason you went with this hand painted look. That wasn't the fact that you're lazy and just decided, F it at the last minute. And that was how you presented it. So go ahead and tell us what we're looking at here in terms of the model itself.
Well, they look hand painted because they are, and this body was a paint test. It was actually I was building a model of a Ford van, and I knew I wanted it to be metallic blue. And this was really a test of metallic blue sprays. So what happened is, I'll tell you the story, that the night before I painted it, we were at the model club, Downriver Model Car Club. And this discussion started about using vintage model kits for slot car bodies. And I guess some people took exception to it. And one of the slot car racers, his name's Joe Morgan. And Joe Morgan, my feeling was, hey, a guy buys a model, he can do whatever he wants with it. So, but Joe Morgan gets up in front of the whole club and starts talking about the benefits of slot cars. And he said, my slot cars can go an actual 60 miles an hour, and that's better than a model that just sits on the shelf and collects dust. And I took exception to that, and I thought, well, Joe, mine are worth keeping in a case so they don't collect dust. And Joe Morgan's got a mullet, right?
I know, Joe.
I'm just going to say it on the podcast. Joe Morgan is kind of a cracker. So I paint this body, right, to test the blue colors, and I had some sublime green, and that was all cool. And then I'm looking at these decals. I go, what should I name it? And it's an old Auto World funny car name decal sheet. and it says like 1968 on it, right? Or 1970. It's from Auto World. Bought it at a swap meet. And there's all these different funny car names. And there's one that says the Hawaiian. And there's one that says the Nutcracker. And there's one that says Bad Bug. And I'm thinking, how could I mix and match these? You know, and I thought of doing the Hawaiian Cracker for Greg Hutchins. But I thought, no, that wouldn't be nice. But then I just thought, how about the Bad Cracker? And it's kind of a play on words because Joe is Joe, and he doesn't have his mullet anymore, but he did at the time. And then I thought it's also kind of a play on, you know, he cracks up model, you know, slot cars. He cracks them up into the, you know, when they come off the track. And then the place where they did slot car racing, slot car drag racing, was TSS Hobbies. And so that's why on the back of the car it says TSS Salvage. But so it was really, you know, the body got painted first, and it's not the first or last time I've done this, but I don't recommend it. Don't do a nice paint job on a body and then decide you're going to build a model for it, because you got to handle, you know, it's just the wrong process. But that's how the body got painted. That's what came first. And then I thought, you know, a 72, 73 Charger body, what would I use for a chassis? And I thought, you know, nostalgia funny cars are hot these days. So I got the NHRA rule book and I got the nostalgia funny car supplement. And a lot of people look at the model and they go, oh, it's an alcohol funny car. Wrong. It's not an alcohol funny car. It's a modern nostalgia funny car. And NHRA does have rules about that, and they do burn nitro. But there are limitations. They have a single stage fuel pump and they have a single magneto. On the other hand, they have a lot of the safety equipment. And again, kind of, you know, back to my love of rules and rule books and understanding, you know, the car looks like this because of the rules, and the rules are predominantly about safety and then also fair competition. So you look at things like the fire extinguishers, you know, there's 2 of them because the rules say you have to have a minimum of 15 pounds. So these are 2 10-pound bottles. There are nozzles. You can see it right in front of the fuel pump. You have to have a nozzle in front of the engine. You have to have a nozzle at the driver's feet. The lines that go to the driver have to run inside the frame rail. So that's why that one coming out of the bottle actually goes into the frame. You have to have a ventilation system, and that's why, and the tubes, or the catch tank is at the back of the chassis, but the oil runs through the frame. You can see it. The driver has an oxygen bottle. That's the little blue bottle behind the roll cage. And there's a white line in the seat. Modern cars, they're not air shifters. They're actually CO2. That's why the bottle's green, because it's CO2. Now, the rules state you have to have a pressure gauge on the bottle. So there's a pressure gauge there. So a lot of this stuff is just because that's what the rules say. And you have to have a guard around the blower belt. And Detail Master sells a nice photo etch guard. So I use that. So really, it's for the rules. You do have to have front brakes. A lot of guys build funny car models without front brakes. Those are photo etch rotors, and then I scratch built the calipers for them. And the brake lines have to be covered in a fireproof material. So that's why it's kind of a light yellow to look like Nomex. So, you know, just looking at the rules informs so much about the details of the build. So I apologize for the hand-painted red striping. At least it's consistently wiggly.
I appreciate the self-advertising too.
So you betcha. So that's the story. The funny thing is, So I used this body for a paint test because I bought it at a swap meet for $5 or $10, and the guy sold it to me cheap because it's warped. That's why you can barely see it. But if you look at the back window, it's blanked out. And a lot of funny cars did have a solid back window. It's just fiberglass. Well, the reason that I did it that way, I didn't put in a clear window, was because after the body was painted and the chassis was done, and to the best of my ability, that the body was lined up with the chassis and the stripes are correct on the body, the stripes didn't line up with the roll cage. Mm-hmm. It was, I had made the interior sheet metal to put the chassis on center to the bottom edges of the body. But one of the bottom edges is warped under. So the bottom edges are offset. But all the sheet metal, all the interior sheet metal was scratch built and finished. So that wasn't going to change. So the chassis is actually offset in the body to one side. And the roll cage didn't line up with the stripes. So I put solid back windows in it so you can't see that. And I cheated a little bit. I offset the tires to one side, so it compensates a little bit. But I go back to IPMS and perfect models. Can I tell the story about judging?
Sure.
Okay. So the boat and the El Camino were in the miscellaneous class in a category called Triathlon. And it's for 3 models from 3 different categories together. And I really wanted to display them together. And this was really the only class where I could do that. You know, it would have been interesting to see how the boat did in the sailing ships class. I think the El Camino could have stood its own in the street machine class. And the figure, the little guy, I call him the beach dude, he's my 3rd entry in triathlon. There are some really, really good figure modelers in IPMS, and I'm not one of them. But I did this guy to go with the boat, really to show the scale of the boat, because a lot of people aren't familiar with a 19-foot beach catamaran. So if I have a guy next to it, it immediately gives people a feel for, you know, how big is the boat, how tall is that mast. So anyways, right. I wanted to display these 3 models together, in triathlon was the category within miscellaneous, or triathlon's the class within the miscellaneous category. So I'm standing around, and I don't like to be this guy, but I'm that guy. I was hovering around, listening to people look at my model. And one of the guys, he's putting his finger up next to the sails, and he's almost touching it. And I'm watching this, and I hear him talking, and they're talking about the telltales. And they're saying, I wonder how he did that. Well, they're not paint, and they're not glued on. I go, they're wire, and they're put through holes. I said, I'm the builder, and you guys are welcome to look at it, but please don't touch it. Well, I come to find out this guy that I just scolded is the team leader for miscellaneous judging. And I thought, well,
you just scolded him.
I better back off a little bit. But the guy was super cool. I'm sorry I forget his name, but he was super cool. And I go, you know, do you think this is the right entry in triathlon? He goes, it's definitely a triathlon entry. I go, do you have any car modelers on your judging team? He goes, what do you mean? I go, well, the guys who are judging miscellaneous, do any of them build model cars? You know, do you really know what you're looking at? I don't think I said that, but I thought that. And the guy goes, you build model cars? I go, yeah. And he goes, well, why don't you join the team? And I go, well, I can't judge my own model. He goes, we have several classes within the category. Of course, you're not going to judge your own model. So I got into judging Friday night in the miscellaneous class. And I was with some veterans. Again, I apologize, I forget their names. Maybe that's best. But these guys were veterans. They were like, one was a 20-year, the other was a 30-year IPMS Nationals judging veteran. So these guys knew the drill. And, I'm not going to say I shut up. I gave my input, but I did a lot more listening than talking. And I was not going to try and change the way things are done at IPMS. I was there to learn. So there's this category called collections, and it's for 5 or more of a related subject.
Yep.
And there was this entry of Gulf War aircraft, and these were, I think they were 172 scale, so they were big, and they were good IPMS builds, just nice weathered paint on the aircraft, lots of detail, markings that looked like paint, everything. I'm looking at this, I go, wow, this is super cool. And these judges go, nope, it's not. Let's move on. So I said, well, wait a minute, guys, this is really nice work. What's wrong? And they go, well, look at this airplane. And there's one of these aircraft, I forget which one. It's got 3 bombs under each wing. And under one of the wings, one of the bombs isn't lined up. It's not straight. And they go, nope, that's going to knock it out. And I go, wait, you guys, you're for that? And they said they saw a seam in one of the wings of one of the models. I said, you guys, you're going to throw away this whole body of work for that? One bomb's out of alignment and you can see a little 1/4 inch, slit on this wing. And the guy looks me straight in the eye and he goes, it's all about the basics.
Ooh.
And yeah, they had a judges meeting, and they said that in the judges meeting, it's about the basics first. And I get that. I'm all about build quality. But I thought, okay, basics, but we're talking perfection in the basics. And that is how these guys were looking at models. And so I went back to the hotel that night. I went, well, I'm screwed. I'm not bringing anything home. I don't build perfect models. My Husqvarna, that's not perfect. The funny car, I can tell you where the bodies are buried. I just told you the body doesn't even work with the chassis. I'll show you something else if you want to pull up that picture. So the funny car has a working body latch, which I think is really cool. It's made of brass and I've got all the underbody structure. They call it the bird cage, but there's all this underbody structure. And then you can barely see it in the corner, but there's a latch on the front of the body. You pull that out and it undoes the latch to let go of the chassis at the front. Look just in front of the gas tank, right? See that bar, the front chassis bar, see that white spot? That's where the latch rubs across the plastic and is rubbed off the paint. And I thought, okay, well, it's all about the basics and I'm screwed. This thing isn't going anywhere. And so, I was happy to be part of the IPMS National. I mean, I just had so much fun. I liked looking at everything there. I mean, I love aircraft carrier models now. It was such a great time. And I enjoyed the judging, and I have so much respect for the guys and the other builders. But I learned that it's just a different approach in what they're looking for. I'm not going to say they're box stock builders, but I do believe they don't do as much scratch building. They don't do the big kit modifications that a lot of car modelers do. And I compare it with GSL, right? Mark Gustafson put that contest on for 30 odd years, every other year or so. One thing I always appreciated about Mark is he said, do a build book and tell me about the risks you took. And so in my build books, in one of the last pages, it was real straightforward on behalf of Mark to say, here are the risks I took. I did a scratch built brass frame, or I had no reference material, or I adapted a modern Revell funny car chassis to an early Revell body, just stuff like that, or I chopped it or whatever. But Mark, and I think at a lot of model car contests, they'll give you a little bit of slack on a lack of perfection in the basics if you've taken big risks and you've done something really ambitious. Whereas I think it's just IPMS is more biased towards get the basics right. It's got to look great. So, I'm not saying they don't reward effort, but unless you're in the room or you've got a build book and they read the build book, how do they know what your effort was? Now, these guys that I judged with, one of them, I don't know exactly what he did, but he was an industry insider and he knew these old kits. Back to the collections class. There was this group of bombers, like Cold War era bombers. I don't know what it was, not a B-36 or a B-56, but some funky thing with these short triangular wings, weird 50s bomber. And the guy had done 5 of them and they looked great, but the judges just went crazy over them. So I said, help me out here. What am I looking at? What gets you guys so excited about these? Because to me, they look like, other IPMS aircraft. And they go, well, the kit that the guy started with, it's a total pile. It was this pyro model. And the guy, to his credit, the builder, had pieces from the pyro kit in his display to show what he started with. But these judges were knowledgeable enough to know that the models were built from this very difficult kit. So it actually got first place because of what the guy started with. So it's pretty fascinating, how models will get judged, whether it's perfection in the basics or what you started with. Some judges will say we honor effort. If you built a Formula One car out of balsa wood, and it looked just like, Hamilton's, 2021 winner, okay, great. But does the judge know you made it out of balsa wood unless you tell him that?
Right.
So, or do they just look at the result and say, yeah, I don't care what you started with. A smart modeler starts with a good kit. If that were true, we'd see nothing but Tamiya's on the table, right?
Model factory heroes.
Yeah, model factory heroes. And to the point that IPMS, model factory hero kits do very well in the car category. So I looked forward to this part of our discussion tonight and wondered what you guys' thoughts are, because judging means a lot to me. I'm competitive, but it means a lot to me because I think contests are really important to the hobby. I don't think we would be at the state of the art we are right now if it weren't for contests in car modeling. It makes everyone better. It's why I want to do contests. It makes me a better modeler. And good judging makes for good contests. Right?
Yeah, I hate competition. It makes me the biggest jerk in the whole place, because I'll walk in and I'll say, mine's better than that. It's better than that. It's better than that. And then, when I walk away with nothing, then I'm like, oh, this is crap.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I was planning on going home with nothing, and I just be up front. I came home with 5 first place medals.
Wow.
I was not expecting that. Thank you. I really wasn't. In fact, I'm pretty good friends with Tim Boyd, and Tim stopped contest modeling a long time ago, and he was a competitive modeler, and he was a competitive modeler when it was in the golden age, mainstream, 1,000 models on the table at Autorama. and the MPC regionals and then the MPC nationals. So Tim was a competitive modeler, and he stopped. One of the reasons he gave was politics. Another was that he wanted to focus on journalism, which is great. So anyways, I'm talking to Tim, and I go, Tim, I think maybe it's time for me to give up contest modeling like you and just build for fun and write articles. And Tim goes, no, you're not there yet. So, which was kind of a compliment in an offhanded way. Tim says, nope, you keep doing contests. Just keep building the way you're building. But I just think it's so important to the hobby. Judging is important to the contests. And, I wish we all thought about it a little more. I recommend, if you get a chance to volunteer judge, do it. Listen, be teachable, but speak up if you have input. And be consistent and know why you're going to award what you do to who you do or for what models. I belong to the Downriver Model Car Club, and we have a theme night every month where in the center of the room, there's a table, you put out a model that meets a certain theme, like, I don't know, movie cars or Fords or drag racers, whatever, there's a theme. 4 months out of the year, I sponsor a little contest, Calnaga Castings model contest, and I'm the lead judge, and I always get a guest judge. And it has been so humbling to try and judge model cars because they all have strengths and weaknesses. Usually the cream rises to the top, right? And I try to look past paint jobs. That's one of my beefs with contest judging, is it always comes down to paint. Well, not necessarily. I do believe that a good paint job is kind of the price of entry to be considered for, your top ribbon or trophy, or, if you're lucky, best in class. You do have to have a good paint job. But then you start getting into details, and you might find deep detail, but it's not realistic. Or another guy has done a great paint job, but he's also got realistic finishes on the engine and the chassis. Or he's got completeness. The depth of detail may not go super deep, but it's across the whole car. It's not just the engine. It's also the suspension. Look at all the number of model cars that don't even have a steering box or a tie rod.
Right.
So you start trying to judge models, and they all have their strengths and weaknesses, and you got to come up with, a first, second, and third. And I can tell you, my experience is first is easier to find than second and third. Right.
Right.
There's usually a lot of third, fourth place kind of models, and those are the ones that you got to really understand why you're awarding the ones you do. And you got to be ready for that builder to walk up to you and go, man, I worked really hard on this. Why didn't I get a ribbon? And sometimes they're teachable. They'll say, what do you think I should do differently? But want me to share another quick story?
Just a second. One thing. James, the contest that you judged where it was like gold, silver, and bronze based on finish.
Open.
I like that. I like that compared to what you were talking about, Steve, of first, second, and third, because you could give away 4 golds and no silvers and no bronzes, or all bronzes and no silvers.
Right. I've seen that.
And my personal favorite, you forgot to put a medal down for that. No, I didn't.
So this is many years ago at GSL. You guys know what GSL is, right?
Right.
Okay. Mm-hmm. This is many years ago. It was the first time I went, and nobody there really knew me, and I didn't know Gustafson that well, but they have this town hall meeting on Friday night, and they float this idea of what if we don't give first, second, and third places, but we'll do a gold, silver, and bronze like they do at IPMS? Kind of a quality award. I don't know what you want to call it, but like you said, James, there could be 3 gold medals. So they float this idea to the group, and they go, anyone have any comments? And guys are commenting. And I stood up and I said, right, this is out in Salt Lake City. I go, hey, I didn't fly out here from Detroit and spend $1,000 on a hotel room to get a participants award. I came here to compete. So I want there to be a first, second, and third. And then I thought, am I being a jerk for saying that? I mean, maybe it's the way I said it, but it was just true. So later I'm in the contest, and Gustafson always used to sit on the side of the room in a chair, right? Kind of holding court. And I'm looking at models and I hear this, Perry, come here. And it's Gustafson. He goes, come here, man. He goes, Perry, you are a great builder and you have got the fire in your belly. I love that about you. Mark, I just like doing contests, So anyways.
I'll say the open system comes from the figure painting world. That's MMSI in Chicago and the other shows that are of that nature started with that. And then some IPMS local chapters have adopted it. We use it for our IPMS contest. But certainly, I think you probably have to shuffle an entire, cruise ship full of old people out of IPMS before they'd ever do that with a national contest, because it does have the reputation of a participation trophy. I am the head automotive judge at Pittsburgh Three Rivers IPMS, and
Really?
I will tell you that there are people that participate who, again, you forgot to put something down. No, I didn't. It is something that, especially for golds, in my opinion, if you get a gold medal in at least at our show, I can't speak to other people's shows, you should have gotten first place. If you got a gold, that should be a first place medal. I'm not giving it out because I feel good. I've said to a number of the people who judge with me, I go home happy. That's all that matters. I don't care if you're happy or not, because I judge with the integrity of you earned that gold medal. Mm-hmm. It's not a situation of you showed up and hey, I like you, here, have a gold medal. So
yeah,
I mean, it's within the way we organize system. We figure, and we're one of the first contests in the area around here. Really, BlizzCon, which is the Columbus IPMS shows in February, and then we're in March, right. And then after that, when you're going to get Buckeye Scale Classic, and you start flowing into the spring contest season. Mm-hmm. And so we usually have a pretty good car turnout. Usually you have 100 plus cars on the table for a small local show, which is almost what the fall automotive contest will bring in. And we should be giving out no more than 10% of that total in golds. Mm-hmm. So they really, because we don't run we run classes, but not categories, right? So there's planes, boats, tanks, miscellaneous. We have sci-fi and Gundam now, and there's automotive. And that's it. That's it. It's one big blanket. You put stuff on the table, and because you're not going, well, what's the best race car and what's the best, drag car and what's the best this? It's all judged against the IPMS rule book. Then we don't have classes like that. So, if you have 100 cars, 9, 10, maybe, because it's just historical averages. Yeah. 9, 10. If you had a car contest, you're probably giving out 15, 20 first places. In reality, we give out less golds than a normal contest would, because we've all been to the car contest where there's 2 things in a category and somebody's getting first place, and it could, it could look like a lemon on wheels in terms of quality, but it's better than the aardvark on wheels sitting beside it. So, I mean, it's I build for contests. I enjoy contests. I'm kind of like, if NNL East wasn't the social setting it was, I would be like, because there's nothing being, it's just, we're all hanging out here. And I went to Toledo back when NNL Toledo existed, when I used to live in Ohio. And, I enjoyed that because it was one time a year I would see my friends from Michigan because I really didn't get up to Detroit that much. And so, it was fun for that, but it's not a contest unless you're building the whiz bang G whiz thing that won best of show, or the engineering award. I can't remember what that guy's name was that award was for. But, I prefer but NNLs, but People's Choice, don't even get me started on that. That
we won't get started.
I'm pointing the wrong direction. It's this way over here. He decided to come down here for a local People's Choice show, and that was a fun experience for him. But to me, I don't know, because like GSL, like I never went. I always wanted to go, and then it ended up ending before I really got into a position where I could go out there. And like they gave out a 4th place. Like that's all. That's like
that's
the first participation trophy at that point. Because like I don't know, but I don't know. I like gold, silver, bronze because I appreciate the idea of awarding work that deserves the awards. Now I know that there are some that probably give too many out, and it is a free for all, and that's local show, and you can't really do anything about that because the next local show you go to, they give their club members all the awards and nobody from outside wins, and you have that weird insider, nonsense going on. But
so, James, tell me about your process for judging. What do you look for? Because if I go to any contest where you're judging, I want to leg up.
Well, I mean, you won first place in the category I was judging, so clearly. And I say, and the great thing is, like, we're all modelers, so we all know every single thing that's wrong with the model that we built, right? I could sit here and give you the laundry list of everything that's wrong, but that dragster was in contention for best automotive. It was one of the 3 things that was getting voted on. So even though you know everything that's wrong with it, and you left the contest room thinking that this was going to be a bloodbath, and they were going to kick you and the cars out into the parking lot or throw them in the lake, since that's the other direction out of that place. Yeah, I mean.
But what, I mean, I'm not fishing for compliments. I'm interested in you as a judge. What's your
criteria?
Process? You walk up to the table. What do you start looking for? How do you filter them out?
I think fair or not, and a lot of it also depends, like, because, not everybody's displaying their model with the body off and things like that. Is, you're going for rudimentary finish. It shouldn't look like a citrus, right? Because there's just some paint jobs that I don't care what the rest of the model looks like. You're probably not gonna dig yourself out of the hole that your body paint got you into in the first place.
Right.
And then it's, at least for me, it's a lot of the IPMS thing of basics first doesn't float water with me, because that you end up with what you saw, where a bomb's out of alignment and now we're not going to do this. Oh, the IPMS, the old joke there is the International Plane Modeler Society, so they're really picky about the airplanes. And you get into a lot of that. Well, that wing, that flap is not the right height. That wing, that aileron's out of order. The wheels are too crooked. And I guess when you have 45 airplanes that are all basically single-engine World War II props, that's a real quick way to go through them. Hey, that's bent. This is off kilter. That's thing, and woof, there. That took care of half the table, right? But it really does come down to me of I think automotive basics are a lot more seams.
Yeah.
Did you clean up your, especially people do this all the time. It drives me up. Well, like, they don't sand the seam line off the top of the radiator cap. Like, the radiator has a seam line going the whole way around. They say that everything off except the radiator cap has a line going down the middle of it. Why? Anything round, obviously, is going to have a seam line on it. Sand that off. Shocks, struts, exhaust systems, and things like that.
Right.
But, it comes into, like, is there visible glue? You'd be surprised, judging as much as I have. That makes me sound like I'm trying to be pompous. But judging as much as I have, you'd be surprised how many times you see fingerprints and stuff. There's fingerprints on the glass, there's fingerprints on the body, there's glue, splishing out of something. You get a lot of people who, and I mean, we all do this, where you've glued something after you've already painted it, and it's, to me, extra thin on, like, lacquer, and it's, to me, extra thin is basically lacquer thinner, and now you've got that little white line going around the part where it's joined because the paint's melted off, and just basic cleanliness, if that makes sense. I don't think really Revell and round two, AMT before it was round two and all that, they sort of figured out the engineering thing somewhere in the 80s and the 90s. You don't really get a lot of tripoding cars anymore like you used to, back in the day.
Right.
But it's just a lot of if things drive me crazy on a personal level, or like not using panel liner, because that just looks ridiculous to me. It's a die cast at that point. Like it has where's the hood, where's the doors? I don't know. We haven't seen them since the model was cast. I don't think Brolin's in the comments here. We've dinged John Brolin a couple of times on race cars that don't have and this goes for any car with decals on it. Don't cut the door lines, don't cut the trunk lines, don't cut the hood lines. How the hell am I getting the door open if the decal goes over the door line? Like, cut that.
It's the bridge over the gap, right?
You've got like a pinstripe going on the whole side of the car, and it's just one big piece. Or you don't cut your bare metal foil at your
right.
door edges. Like, how am I getting this open? This chrome piece is one piece from the windshield to the trunk. I don't know how I'm getting in this car.
That's funny.
People who put things. People
what
who
about
put
detail?
Who don't finish the bottom of their cars. Like, why? Why are you showing me this unfinished model? Detail has to be done well. If you're going to add aftermarket, the aftermarket has to be applied correctly. If you want to say right, it has to be applied well. I don't need your engine in the right firing order, because honestly, God standing there, I wouldn't know what the firing order is anyway. But like your Hemi spark plugs can't be going into the cylinder heads. They go on the top. That's why they're there. I had a guy that I dinged a whole bunch of times because his battery cables were going into the side of the battery. Like, they weren't on the top on the terminals. They just were drilled into the battery, the fender wells, and all over the place. Like, you tried to add detail, but that was such a fail of detail. You shouldn't have done it. You should have just left that off. It would have looked better off alone. And the same thing goes with like 3D printing. If you're going to use 3D printed parts and they're bad quality 3D prints, you better clean that 3D print up, right? It can't just be all wavy layer lined all the way through, because that's basic prep at that point.
Right. See all the support.
Yeah, exactly.
Either the little
pimples
sticking up or the craters where the support broke out.
People who want to rust a Corvette, it's fiberglass. It doesn't rust.
That's funny. I know. I used to think that, a good competitive model had a lot of detail and depth of detail. And that's still my thing. But kind of the reason has changed. It's not as much about trying to build a competitive model as I like the engineering. I like what that detail represents. And if the rule book said it needs to be there, that's why it's there. Or, I finished a career of 40 years in engineering. 30 of that was automotive, 20 of those with an OEM. And, I saw a lot when it came to packaging and function and testing. And so when I'm doing an engine compartment, I really enjoy all that stuff that gets crammed in there and why is it there. And, the El Camino I did, that's an 87, but I think by modeling standards, that's a late model. And I wanted to get that, OEM look of just this engine compartment all full of stuff that a lot of hot rodders would just throw it in the trash can. But real cars on the road don't look like that. They have a bunch of stuff. And so in my El Camino, there's cruise control, and there's a vacuum reservoir for the cruise control, and there's a vacuum reservoir for the air conditioning, and there's power steering hoses that you can barely see. I like that stuff. And like I said, I used to do it to be competitive, and I don't think it makes you that competitive anymore. I don't think judges are really looking for it. But I still do it because I like it and, enjoy the engineering aspect of it.
We had this past year at our show a gentleman who built the newer, well, it's half new because the body's new, that 72, 72 Olds 442, the coupe that Revell came out with. And he had taken the detail, I guess, a model car garage, has the PE set for that from the convertibles. And what really impresses me is that guy applied the if anybody's seen that PE set, the 442s on that are separate. They're individual letters.
Really? Wow.
Okay, well now you're putting a line down so that you get those on there, and you got to get them on level on both sides, because you don't want one side being higher than the other in terms of equidistance when you're looking at it. Sure. In the back and all that PE. We actually had a conversation with that, me and one of the head judges for the whole contest, because he was saying, well, he didn't paint the engine compartment. I said, what do you mean he didn't paint the engine compartment? I mean, I have a model. I know he painted the engine compartment. He's like, no, that black's too uniform. That's plastic. I said, sir, that whole model is cast in white other than the chrome tree. That is paint. He's like, well, that paint looks like plastic. I'm like, that's the point, right? It's a realistic finish. That's something I'm looking for, because, well, we've all seen the brush painted X18, and then it's up being blotchy as heck. Right, how much reducer and retarder you put into that, it still comes out blotchy. But that's something that's a detail to that that's really going to stand out, is that has the exact right tone and sheen to it that it needs to have. And I've seen it done wrong so many times that when you see it done right, it's like, hey, some guy figured out how to.
Yeah.
Plus,
I like seeing that
tiny
too.
Little 442s.
I like seeing that too, of different sheens and tones of black and gray in an interior, because there's no such thing as a semi-gloss black interior.
Right.
Go look inside your car. There's nothing semi-gloss black in there. Nothing shines.
Right.
But it's not flat either. It's somewhere in between semi-gloss and flat.
Right. The same with the chassis, right? Chassis has all kinds of different shades on it, but a lot of model cars get painted. My little joke is various shades of flat black. But yeah, real chassis has lots of different coatings, and then things happen to the coatings, including rust and dirt, which I credit IPMS. I mean, I like what I've observed and learned, like reading Fine Scale Modeler magazine. I respect the tanks and the weathered stuff. And, I may not want to make something muddy, but it inspires me to say, what would a car with 60,000 Southern California miles on it look like underneath? It wouldn't be rusted out, but it wouldn't be showroom fresh either. So what would it look like, and how am I going to achieve that? And that's, a lot of skill comes in. I'm not saying I have that skill yet, but the IPMS guys that do that realistic weathering, I think it's inspiring, and I'm trying to learn. Same thing with figures. I'm not a great figure modeler, but I do them because it improves my skills, and sometimes having a decent figure next to a model will enhance the model. But anyways, yeah.
All right, Steve, we talked about two of your most recent models and your experience here at IPMS and in Wisconsin. We'll have to work on you for the rest of the year to get you down to Virginia. Well, it's not Virginia Beach; it's Hampton. You'll be on the wrong side of the river if you go to Virginia Beach. But get you down to Virginia for next year, or Fort Wayne for 2026. But at any rate, how did you get started in modeling? Where does your story start? Where's the origin? Yeah, where's the origin story?
So this, is going to sound like a lot of guys. Started when I was young. I grew up in Southern California, and my dad was a World War II vet. He worked on B-17s and B-29s. My older brother, who's 6 years older, was a car guy, and they were just kind of my inspiration for mechanical things. So growing up in the 60s, modeling was very mainstream. You go into lots of different stores carried them, including drug stores and variety stores. So I just wanted to build models. And I think my first model was actually a Mitsubishi or a Zero, a World War II fighter. and I did a terrible job on it. But one of the first car models I can remember doing was the Monkey Mobile, and this is when the monkeys were on TV. Right. This is probably a first issue Monkey Mobile. But anyways, I think my brother might have helped me, but we spray painted it red out of the can and put it together, and it had, steel axles, the wire axles. And so you could roll it on the floor. And so it made a great toy. And yeah, the Monkey Mobile was cool. But I just like building cars because my older brother was working on real ones. And I heard him and his friends talking about him, and I can remember trying to do more and more detail. I remember once I did a 68 Camaro, and it had battery cables on it, a red and a black battery cable. And I was probably about 12, So I showed it to my brother, and I go, "Look, I even have the battery cables." And he goes, "Yeah, but you got the red and the black switched." But so accuracy is important. But anyways, that's how I got started. It was just fun. I liked working with my hands. I like independent play. I'm kind of an introvert at times. It may not seem like it to some, but I really am. So yeah, it just fit in. And then being in Southern California, there was just car racing of all kinds everywhere all the time. Just drag racing alone. We had Irwindale Raceway, Orange County International Raceway, Lyons Raceway, right? You think about other kinds. We had Ontario Motor Speedway, Riverside Raceway. I mean, you guys will love this. I actually saw not Mark Donahue. I saw Bruce McLaren and Denny Holm driving McLarens in Can-Am at Riverside.
Okay, cool.
Pretty cool stuff. I saw Jungle Jim Lieberman at Orange County International Raceway doing fire burnouts. You say, well, Jungle Jim, he was a Pennsylvania guy. And Jungle Pam explained to me that in the cold months, they would come out west. Anyways, there was racing of all kinds. And Ascot Park, sprint cars, dirt bikes, So I just really liked building model cars, and I liked making them more and more accurate. I didn't do a lot of contest modeling, except for the LA Custom Car Show at the LA Sports Arena. They had a model car contest, and I brought a couple models to that, and didn't win anything, but I guess I was a junior, and they gave you free models just for entering. So that was good. And then when I was in high school, I built it was a 58 Corvette body on a Gene Snow Charger funny car chassis. Had a kind of a nice paint job, and that actually won, I think, a second place in senior division. But I really didn't do contest modeling when I was young. Went to college. I look back, I think the longest period I've ever gone in my life without building a model is 4 years, which was the beginning of college. But even after that, starting out in my career, I would occasionally build a model. And I really got into contest modeling when I moved to Detroit. I came to Detroit to work in the auto industry in 1998. And in 1999, I entered the Detroit Autorama contest. And I had built a replica of my dad's 34 Ford. And he had this car in high school, and he had a few old black and white pictures. And, it was built out of a monogram kit. And it won first place in street rod. And I was just so excited. I had never won anything. And I mean, I worked hard on it, but I didn't have a pair of calipers at the time. I had a machinist scale. So I was working to hundredths of an inch, and now I do work to thousandths of an inch accuracy. But at the time, it was a good effort for me, and I just felt so great about it. And then I built this Challenger, and I applied myself to do good engine detailing. It was a 70 Challenger with a 446 pack. And, of course, I did ignition wiring and I did battery cables, but I also did some of the electrical lines. And then I even did some of the emissions equipment that went on the engine. And of course, this Challenger had a shaker hood scoop, and I set it up so that the hood scoop would actually mount to the carburetor and fit through a hole in the hood lined up. And it was good, and I won best engine. So I don't think I won best street machine, but I won best engine, and that really felt good. So I kind of got hooked, and the Autorama was my thing. And then I went to, we have some shows in Macomb. There's an NNL in the fall, and then in February, March timeframe, there's an actual contest, the Motor City Madness contest. So I started entering those, and was just learning from the guys that beat me, and was always trying to do the next one better and better. I built this model. It's kind of weird. It was, remember the monogram Bad Medicine? It was a Tom Daniels show rod.
Yes.
Blech.
Right. I mean, not your thing. So it was this show rod. And it's kind of cartoony, it comes with a skeleton in the driver's seat, and it's got sort of a small block Chevy. And I thought, what if you took a Tom Daniels show rod, but you put on realistic technical detail? So I put a Boss 429 in it, twin turbo Boss 429, all detailed. I had oil cooling lines, the bearing oil lines to the turbos, and it had the front suspension off of an Indy car, rocker suspension, and it had, in the back of the medicine wagon, you could open up these panels, and it had an actual cooling system, radiator, and there was a hydraulic pump to lift up the roof of it. So, I was trying to push myself a little bit, and that was the first model I ever had. I had it at the NNL when it was down in Sylvania, and it got photographed by Scale Auto magazine. And I was so excited. I had brought the family right down to Toledo, and my wife and the kids, the babies, they're back in the hotel room, and I'm at the contest. Well, I come home from it's not a contest, it's an NNL. I come home from the NNL. Honey, I'm going to be in Scale Auto. Like Jim Hott actually took pictures of my car. It's like, I was so excited, And to this day, I really feel like getting a picture of your model in a magazine is right on par with, a second or a first place in class. And I've talked to guys that have said that, it's fun to be a photographer because you get to put guys' models in the magazine, and it means so much to them. It's just so much fun. But anyways, so that's kind of where it went, and was wanting to get better and better. And in 2004, I gave myself a gift of a book by Bob McClurg called Gassers, Altereds, Funnies, and Diggers, The Golden Age of Drag Racing. And it's kind of a coffee table book. It's a lot of pictures, a little bit of writing. Bob McClurg was a great drag racing photographer. And there was a picture in it of this Willys gasser, the Prock and Howell Willys. And it was actually an outlaw gasser because it had a flip-top body. They ran it on nitro, so it wasn't legal for the gas class. And in the summer of 1969, 4 gasser teams did what they called the outlaw gasser circuit, and Prock and Howell was one of them. And I saw that picture in this book, and I said, I got to build a model of it. So I had, if you want to pull up a picture, that's one of the ones I sent you.
Yeah, I got it.
But that model was really a quantum leap, because the original game plan was use the Ohio George 33 Willys body. That's straightforward enough. And use a Polar Lights funny car chassis. And yeah, just the paint job on the real car is just so cool. And anyways, I said, I want to build a model of this. So I got into it, and the Polar Lights chassis was too wide in the front. And this is a Logie chassis car, I learned. And I found out that the real car had been restored and was owned by a guy named Steve Tomozik in Belleville, Michigan, not too far from here. And Jay Howell, he's on Facebook now, and he's got a bunch of pictures of it that he posts now and then. Jay Howell was the driver. Tom Prock was the owner. Tom Prock's son was Jimmy Prock, the NHRA mechanic, and Jimmy Prock's son is Austin Prock, who is now driving a top fueler for John Force. So that's the Prock of Prock and Howell. But anyways, the Polar Lights chassis wasn't going to work. So I said, why don't I try and make one out of soldered brass? So it's my first soldered brass chassis. And I said, as long as I'm doing this, why don't I make working suspension? And those shock absorbers are actually white metal parts from R&D Unique.
I remember that.
They were in the Seattle, Washington area. And they're out of business, but that's what those started out as. And I modified them, and I made working coilovers. And then the front suspension is all brass, and is posable steering. The rear suspension works. And I really, really pushed myself to kind of take it to a next level. And a really interesting thing happened is I was thinking about, the car wasn't finished, right? And it's far from being painted. But I was in an accident at work, and I had to talk to medical. And the medical person said, I'm going to send you home today. You know, you've been in an accident experience. I'm just going to send you home. If I send you home and give you the day off, the afternoon off from work, what are you going to do? And I was really stressed out. I said, well, I got a lot to do. I've got bills to pay. I've got housework to do. There's just so many projects. And she goes, no, what do you want to do? If I give you the afternoon, what do you want to do? And I was just like kind of in shock at the question. I said, I want to build models. That's what I really want to do. She goes, well, that's what I want you to do. She said, I want you to go home and treat yourself well and do something fun that you like to do. Go build your models. And I was working on this Prock and Howell at the time. And I made a decision. I'm going to take this thing to GSL. So the Christmas before, I spent Christmas vacation building a paint booth in the basement. And this paint job was the first paint job that came out of the basement paint booth. I finished the model. I took it to GSL, and it won first place in straight line comp at GSL. And I was just really gratified with that. And, was happy with the model. So there's more to this story. That was when was GSL? Late March, early April of 2007. So then I'm at the NNL in Toledo in October. And, standing around, it's a big social event, and somebody points out Tim Boyd. And they go, yeah, that's Tim Boyd over there. Well, I've been reading Tim Boyd articles for decades, right? I said, really? So I walked up and I said, "Hi, Tim. My name's Steve Perry. I really enjoy your articles. I've learned a lot from it. I just wanted to say hi." And he goes, "Oh, you're Steve Perry." And I said, "Well, yeah, how do you know me?" And he goes, "You built the Proc and Hell Willies." And we just started talking. And Tim had started a version that he never finished until a couple of years ago. But this model was sort of an entry to Tim. And Tim was an executive at Ford. I worked at Ford. I was not an executive. But Tim just became a friend and a mentor in so many different areas. Tim helped me with modeling journalism and always encouraging me. Like I said, Tim doesn't compete, but Tim encourages, me to compete and build. And he's just been such a great friend and a mentor. But really, this Proc and Hell Willies, I would never have known the doors that it would open. I mean, it's a cool enough model, but it just kind of had a lot of repercussions, good repercussions on me and my modeling career. Just opened up doors. So that's the story of it.
It's a neat story.
Yeah.
Well, Steve's work getting kind of close to the end of the show here. I want to give you the opportunity to advertise your resin business. Give us the plug here. I showed the page on the last episode, but tell us what you do.
You did? Okay, so I have a little resin casting company called Calnaga Castings. It's a funny word. It's because I'm from California and my wife is from Nagaland, India. That's her state in India. So it's Calnaga Castings, and I do primarily 1/25th scale hard parts. I don't do car bodies or bumpers or grills, but I do engines and valve covers and blowers and blower pulleys and transmissions, a lot of technical parts, because that's what I'm into. The way we got started is I was building the freight train dragster, and I think you've got some pictures of that. The freight train dragster is a twin engine dragster, and I needed 4 small block Chevy Mickey Thompson valve covers. And I couldn't find any, but I could find a big block Chevy Mickey Thompson valve cover. So I modified that, and I made a small block Chevy Mickey Thompson valve cover, but I needed 4 of them. So I made a mold of it. And then I made a resin casting of the valve cover. Yeah, there they are. I was real picky about the superchargers, and I went to the swap meet and I looked in all kinds of grab bags and boxes of parts. And I felt that these superchargers were the most accurate GMC 671s that I could find. But I had 1 and I needed 2. So I made a mold of it and made castings. Same thing for the injector. One of the injectors was actually scratch built from brass and Bondo, but I needed 2 of them. So that's what got me into resin casting. And I felt like, I could make little parts and sell them. And my older brother said, yeah, you should do that. And he set up the website for me. And that was 13 years ago. And it's always been about, it's not to make money. Of course, I charge for the parts because I can't give them away. But it's not really to make money. It's a way to give back to the hobby. I really mean that sincerely. When you go to the trouble of making a part, whether it's scratch built or modified kit part, that's really cool, then it's great to be able to share it. And that was the impetus for Calnaga Castings. I mean, if you look at the front cover, right, on the front engine, you'll see a little finned timing chain cover. So that's a piece of HO scale railroad boxcar siding, and I cut it in the shape of a small block Chevy timing cover and made a casting of it. There's actually one of those on the second engine, but you can't see it. But again, things like that, that's a cool little part. And so now everyone can get that if they want it. It's in the store. So that's how Calnaga got started. And to this day, that's still what it's about, just sharing cool parts that I've come across, whether I make them myself or it's a kit part. I do try to avoid simple knockoffs of kit parts. There's usually value added, whether it's in assembly or cleanup or added detail. But I can't say I'm 100% on this, but I really try not to be that guy that just takes a rare kit part and makes a casting of it and then sells it. If it's rare, there's some value in that, but there is value added in most cases. So we have a new website with modern contemporary security features. The new website is pretty easy to navigate. There's a gallery of many of my models that use Calnaga parts, and we use PayPal. It's pretty convenient. And so, yeah, thanks, James, for letting me do a shout out. And yeah, a couple of my models, actually, there it is.
Cool.
They say Calnaga, but yeah, so you can click on the gallery or click on the shop. It's broken down into categories. There's the gallery, so you can click on one of those.
Very cool.
There's the El Camino. Javelin. That's a funny model. That's the Mercury Super Marauder. It's a replica of a Mercury concept car that was part of Mark Gustafson's Lynx project, if you haven't heard of that. But
right.
Mark, actually Bob Downey started the body work, and then Bob stopped and Mark recruited me to finish the model. And I put a bunch of work in it. It almost made me quit modeling. But it came out really nice. So instead of giving it to Mark, I kept it and I built another one that's more of a curbside. And that's what Mark got. So that's the 72 Mustang that's under construction. So James, you'll like this. Those M&H tires were actually 3D printed tires that I designed, printed them with the M&H logo, and then I resin cast them in white, and then you can paint them black and sand off the letters. No decals to mess with, no stencils. It's fun and easy, and they look pretty good.
So, Steve, what's your magnum opus? Magnus? What is it, James?
What's your lifetime achievement award?
Yeah,
right.
You guys got the heads up on that, and so the short answer is, I don't have one as far as modeling. However, there are certain subjects that I do want to do, and I want to do a really good job. So when it comes to race cars, it would be Mark Donohue, Roger Penske's Porsche 917-30. You know, the blue and yellow Sunoco Can-Am car that basically was so frickin' fast it killed the Can-Am series. To me, that is the greatest race car ever built. The problem with doing a model of it is it's been done before so many times.
Right.
Simon P. Rivera did that car in 143 scale that made me want to cry. I mean, Simon is just, to me, the king of 43 scale. And he had that at GSL, and it's so detailed. But anyway, so the 917-30 is on the list. There's another drag racing subject. It's a Bill Grumpy Jenkins Monza. So you see a lot of Vegas, you see a lot of Camaros, you see Bill Jenkins Novas, but the Monza Pro Stocker didn't get a lot of love. So that one's on the bucket list. Another model I want to do that will probably be almost all scratch built is a dirt bike. I'm going to do it in 1/12 scale because I like to do all my bikes in 1/12. and it would be a 73 Mako 400 radial. So I don't know if you guys are into dirt bikes at all, but back in the day when the sport was in its infancy in the United States, and I raced motocross for a few years myself, the cool guys rode Makos. And the Mako 400 radial refers to the cylinder head, and the cooling fins were laid out radially. It's in the early era of long travel suspension, so it has twin shock absorbers, but they're laid down, and it has pretty long forks. And the cool guys rode Makos, and so I'll never ride one, but I could be cool and at least build a model of one. So if you want to do that. But probably I build models that are important to me. And the model, I don't know what scale I'm going to do it in. Maybe I'll do it in 25th and 16th, or 25th and 1/12th, try and do a Randy Dare. But it's my 72 Corvette. And I've owned the car for 29 years. And it's an NCRS top flight car. I've had that car longer than I had my job at Ford. I've had the car longer than I've had my wife. I mean, and I don't think either of them are going anywhere very soon. So anyways, I just love this car. And again, to that, the good and the bad news is I've got the perfect reference parked in the garage. Now, the bad news is I got to do it justice.
Right.
If I do it in 25th scale, it will still probably have working T-tops and headlights, opening headlights. The engine compartment's got to be perfect. And I may settle for someone else's 3D printed small block Chevy if it's better than I can do and if it looks like the car's engine. But it's going to be dead nuts when I do it. And maybe I should do it in 12th or 16th scale just to really do it justice. I was watching your podcast with Randy Dare, and he said something that's true. Everyone knows this if they think about it, but I like the way Randy said it. When you're working in larger scale, you have to do every detail, like every nut and bolt. You can't, and Randy said, you can't put a blob of silver paint to represent a nut. You've got to have a real nut. And I think that's the kind of love I need to give to this Corvette replica. So maybe it will be in big scale. Another reason I don't build in big scale is I don't have room on the shelves. But for this car, I probably would find room. So,
yeah.
But thanks for asking. That's my magnum opus list.
Excellent. So, Steve, we want to thank you very much for coming on tonight with us, sharing a little bit about your background and your models. And to everybody who's still hanging in there, good crowd tonight. We really appreciate you tuning in for another episode of the Automotive Podcast. And we will see you guys in 2 weeks with who?
Marcos Cruz.
That's right. So tune in for that.
Very cool.
And we will see you guys on the other side.
Thank you, guys.
Good night, guys.